All right. Welcome, everybody. You're at Visionality's Building Forward. My name is Emily Barney, and our guest star today is my friend Tina Knight, and she's at Oxnard College. And you know the jam here. We cover a really big, meaty topic in 25 minutes or less. So we're going to set our timers for 25 minutes. And today, Tina is going to be talking with us about how remote work influences our sense of belonging. So, Tina, talk to me a little bit about why this topic is really important to you and how we sort of created it.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Tina Knight, Director of Advancement at Oxnard College. And, I want to start for us, the remote implications of the pandemic have impacted both our students and our staff and faculty. So there's remote work and there's remote learning. And being a very student-centered campus, I want to start with the impact of the pandemic on students, and then I'll talk a little bit about remote work. But I want to talk about remote learning, and a lot of the experiences of our students mirror the experiences of working professionals as well. So I'm going to share my screen and just share a couple quick facts that might be helpful to set the stage. And hopefully everyone can see this. I can make it a little bigger. But here's just some basic facts. This is from the At Real College survey from 2021, and they were looking at mostly that survey, and I will add that to the articles. I'm not sure if it was in there originally, but it focuses more on like basic needs of college students. But this particular 2021 Real College survey did have a lot of information about the pandemic impact on college students, and particularly community college students. So as you can see, we had 3 and 5 college students that experienced basic needs insecurity during the pandemic. 39% of our community college students are impacted by food insecurity. 48% are impacted by housing insecurity, and about 14% of community college students throughout California are in fact homeless. And we see that here at Oxnard College. We have some students who live in their cars. We do our best to get them, housing, at least hotel, motel vouchers, or other housing for like critical periods of time, like finals week and midterm time. As we see all over, equity gaps are increasing. That is true in the student experience during the pandemic as well, where Black and African American students had a 16% higher percentage points in basic needs insecurities. We have about 13% who lost a loved one to COVID, and about 35% who exhibited at least moderate anxiety. And we've got the one thing the government did great during this pandemic was automatically award additional funding to college campuses to provide emergency grants for students during the pandemic. So that's just some of that information there. And then some of the mental health challenges, and that's really where we're focused here on overcoming those issues, are things like, let me increase this. So this is just the percentage of students. We had about 46% who experienced social isolation, loneliness. Students were experiencing increased anxiety, lack of focus, a loss of ability to concentrate, struggling with laziness. I know I've had that problem during COVID. I really learned how to be lazy. Loss of sleep, decrease in physical activity, unhealthy eating habits. So you can see just all kinds of issues, a significant increase in rates of depression, self-doubt, And then students also had these, issues that make attending school more challenging, especially in a remote online environment, when they are experiencing things outside of school. So that was things like increased screen time, difficulty making friends, meeting peers, developing romantic relationships, more tension with the family when everyone is stuck at home together. Students did find some ways to provide self-care for themselves, spending more time on hobbies, trying to get some physical activity in, trying to spend time outdoors. Pets, that's my go-to for stress relief, is a little furry time. And then the big challenges that students had following the pandemic, once they have returned to campus, and we are about, I'd say, half and half now, virtual versus in-person. And some students want all in-person, some want all virtual. We're finding a lot of students looking for hybrid courses that offer a little bit more flexibility. So things that have been challenging are, and particularly in the hybrid environment, is meeting people, right? That's what college is about. That's where you meet lifelong friends and develop relationships, often meet your, first significant romantic partner, maybe even your future spouse. And so those kinds of things, like inability to connect with peers, inability to meet folks on campus, as well as just the concentration things, right? Difficulty completing the homework, getting to class on time, maintaining their GPA. And like I said here, like what students were looking most forward to was things like meeting folks, attending classes in person, spending time on campus and in the quad. So when those things weren't happening, I think that's really what led to some of those more significant mental health challenges for our students. And then on the work side, so we were fully remote, and I came about in the midst of the pandemic. So I came in December 2021. We did not come back to fully in person in the office until January of this year. And that has come with its challenges as well, right? So I think we're experiencing the same things a lot of our nonprofit partners are experiencing, in that there's no one work style that fits everyone. Some people I loved being in the office. I like connecting with peers in the hallway, in the break room, having those conversations that it's just harder to have when you have to spend time and do it intentionally when you're working remotely. But we also have folks for whom the remote work works well, right? They have children, have older adults living in their home. There's concerns about COVID still. There's also just the, commute. A lot of folks are commuting long distances. So it really creates, some quality of life for some folks. We are in a unionized environment, which makes it challenging for you to allow what works for each individual. We really have to have a little bit more of a structured policy on in-office time versus out of office time. And I know that not a lot of our nonprofit partners struggle with that issue of being a unionized environment, but it is something that the campus needs to take into consideration.
Well, and that's such an interesting aspect, right? Because the unions exist to create equity and equality, but what you're experiencing is actually perhaps like a reduction of that, because things need to be the same, things need to be equal.
Right. Yeah, we're doing the equality, not equity, right? Not
exactly.
giving each person what they need. And that has been challenging. We are piloting some remote work for positions that aren't student facing.
Right.
And that we also, there is also the thing that campuses like ours, where you are have to create such a uniform, structured approach, is, are we going to be able to recruit, the best folks going forward? Because we know workers are looking for flexibility. They're looking for work, their work style to work for their lives, and not just since there are still campuses that will allow folks to work remotely, not in necessarily the community college system, but in other higher ed environments. And so it will be an issue of competitiveness for us hiring going forward, I think, as well.
Yeah, it's just I'm so curious, through the whole pandemic, as a person who has been living with depression and anxiety for decades, I have my tools, right? I know that I need sunshine. I know that I need exercise, especially when I don't want to do it. I know that I need a puppy, right? I know that when I'm depressed, I'm not going to reach out to my friends. So I have to have things pre-scheduled or else I'll just sit in my house. So I'm curious, as an adult working with younger folks going through this, I'm like, what about, these kids might likely didn't have the same established toolkit. They haven't been in therapy for 12 years, right? So I'm curious how that was being an adult who has some tools and working with individuals who have less access to that kind of experience.
Yeah, I definitely think that has been a challenge. So one of the things we did was we used the federal HERF funding, which was the COVID funding that came to educational institutions, to add mental health counselors to our counseling staff. We provided that counseling either in person or online. We added bilingual mental health counseling staff. We did a lot of messaging to students about, healthy ways to navigate the pandemic. The challenge, I think, for us has been in an institution that serves a fairly low income and largely a Latino, Latinx population. There has been students that have reported a stigma around seeking mental health services. And so that's, a lot of the kind of messaging on things like Facebook and our social media pages have been to address those students who aren't, willing to engage in mental health services. But we've also done a lot of work around trying to destigmatize seeking mental health services, getting those tools. I do think, yes, it has been a real challenge for students. I think college students probably a little less so than, say, high school students. I think high school students and junior high students really struggled during the pandemic because they have even less tools, right? Students to just have to have a certain amount of resilience and grit and determination just to get here to Oxnard College from the population we are serving. But the folks who don't make it, and the younger population, I think that's an area that has been really, really challenging. And I think, having struggled with depression, you might understand the way that kind of impacts your self-esteem too.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and the ability to, it really takes a lot of courage when you come from the background that a lot of our students do to show up on campus and be, working 2 jobs and going to school and helping care for the families. So it takes a lot of energy that gets zapped when you are experiencing that anxiety and depression.
Yeah, well, and I see we've got some very talented educators on with us. So I want to encourage everyone to weigh in on the chat, right? Tina and I are having a conversation, but we together collectively have all the answers. So if something is resonating with you, or if you have an experience that maybe you want to share either in the chat or raise your hand and you can come on camera and let's have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
Tina, I'm curious, What do you think we'll see as employers with new employees coming into the workforce who went through college during this experience? Like, what should we expect? What accommodation should we be prepared to offer? Like, what are you seeing on that front?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. So flexibility, I think is key, right? We are learning that in our coursework. So we are going through a process where we are trying to create district-wide schedules that are a little bit more flexible, maybe hybrid, where there's more evening and weekend or shorter semesters, especially because we're catering to working students for the most part. The things I think in terms of not so much accommodations, but the challenges you might face. I mean, um, uh, we have a lot of students come to school in their pajamas. I mean, that has always happened in California. I did it. But for workplaces that expect a like higher level of professional dress and style, that should be something that is discussed up front. Those expectations, I really think just I for one love the fact that we've casualed up things a little bit, but that's not true everywhere. I also feel like students have had and this may not be true of every institution. I feel like students are in one of two buckets. Either they've had a strong wraparound support services in which they've been given a lot of services and instruction and direction and may have a harder time adjusting to a workplace where they're expected to work very independently and make those decisions themselves, or they've kind of just gone off the radar and haven't engaged in those structured services. And those folks are going to need some direction as well, right? So, but we'll also expect some flexibility. So I think those are the challenges that we'll see in the workplace. But for sure, what we are seeing is folks want flexibility. The wage information, the wage difference is real, that salaries have to come up, especially in the nonprofit sector, to be competitive. Yeah, that's going to be a challenge for the nonprofit sector. But what the nonprofit sector does offer is some of those other things that they might not get elsewhere, like a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more casual work environment, a little bit more ability to try different things and not be pigeonholed into a specific role. So I think there's pros and cons both ways.
Yeah, and my sense of the generation that is in college right now, graduating college, is there's this big underlying question of like, why are we even doing this? Like, okay, you say I can't come to work or come to school in my pajamas, but like I sit in an office and I interact with nobody. So tell me why I can't come to work in something that's comfortable, then maybe I'll work faster when I'm comfortable. So is that sentiment resonating with you, with the kiddos that you interact with?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it is, I mean, that'll be interesting, right? To see how the world of work changes. And I think it's changed. I mean, in my career, like I've worked at places in the past where you couldn't have visible tattoos, right? So there are things that just the whole culture is changing, and the work world is going to have to get with those changes. So I think that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, the other thing that I heard was we just need to be really clear about the expectations, right? And the other thing that I want to talk about is that equity versus equality, in this sense that we each need different tools to show up as our true and best self. And so that to me is going to be the big shift that we're experiencing now, is just accepting that we are not all robots. We do not all fit in the same box. And that's actually a beautiful thing. It's actually a good thing. And we will, in fact, get the best outcomes out of people if we allow them to be different.
100%. Yeah, diversity of opinion, diversity of work style, all of that leads to better planning.
Well, and I'm going to tell you, it's expensive and it's hard, right? To
Yeah.
to accommodate, to give, to do your best to strive for um, equity, not equality, because you can't just, this is the way it is. You need to make adjustments over time for people's changing needs. What are you seeing at the college going forward, to build equity into the offerings to the students?
To the students, I think we're doing a really good job, right? So that's the move to maybe shorter
Yeah.
semesters, or having a regular semester, but also having offerings that are 8 weeks instead of 16 weeks or 10 weeks, and offering more. What we have done in the last year that is actually creating that equity and ability for folks who haven't had the ability to go to college before is what is called our PACE program, which is Program for Accelerated College Education. So we take courses, and we started with just a few majors, right? Like psychology and business, the big majors. And we are offering them on evenings and weekends in the community instead of on campus. So they are at as well as we have some non-credit ESL classes, right, to
Mhm.
get folks prepared in English to move on to that PACE program, to do classes in English. And all of those we are offering like at the local middle schools and at the high schools. So places in their community close by. We are far down rows, so it can be a challenge to get here. And so those kinds of offerings that are more flexible, that cater to, say, working adults, and then that also, working youth, right? We have most of our students are working 1 to 2 jobs. So all of those kinds of programs are going to impact them just as much as the reentry students. So I think, and as well as making sure that the larger courses have offerings in person, on Zoom, and hybrid if there's enough of an enrollment, so that students really can pick the option that works best for them. Because what we're learning is there's no one thing that works best.
And what is the reaction on the faculty side, um, needing to make that? How the heck do you teach 3 different ways? I'm just gonna say it. Like, what's the
It's
reaction from the staff on that kind of evolution?
Yeah, it's challenging. I would say everyone's least favorite is the hybrid,
Yeah.
where you have in the same class folks online and in the classroom. It's just really hard to attend to both audiences. Someone is either the folks online are going to feel a little left out, or the folks in the room are going to feel a little left out. So I would say that's everyone's least favorite. Um, and then virtual, there's a mix, right? And it's a balance, right? Virtual might work for some faculty better for their schedules. It might not be their favorite
Mhm.
modality. It's definitely harder to connect.
Yeah.
I will say, I teach classes for the Center for Nonprofit Leadership. I taught one during the pandemic remote and did not love it. I taught the same class just recently, the first class back in person, and it was so much more fun for me as an instructor. You get the energy from the students, which is why you're there, for
Mhm.
energy and connection, and to really build those relationships. And I think it was better for the students as well. But there's also drawbacks of, like, we're all busy working adults. And so sometimes I won't go to in-person things because I can't get off campus to do it, right? Whereas if it's hybrid, I might be able to participate. Might not be my favorite modality, but it works better with the schedule.
It's better than nothing.
Yes, for sure.
So if you had a magic wand, how do we make hybrid better? And I know that I'm really experiencing that in my company, because we are a remote company and we have employees who live in other states. And so even if I was like, yeah, invest the time to drive down, that's just not possible. But also with our clients where, they're struggling. Do we move our board meetings back in person? Do we keep them virtual? Do we do hybrid? So y'all have so much experience with what works and what doesn't work on hybrid. So if you had a magic wand, like, what would the software be? What would the solutions be?
Oh gosh. I think a solution would be, and I don't know how this would get done, but so, I mean, you could teach that way, but have some period within the class where there is interaction amongst the people online and the people in the class. So, right, the faculty is interacting with both, but the students themselves are not interacting with both. So a way, so what I would do is, I guess, figure out a way that there's some sort of group activity, and this would require more technology, right? Laptops at workstations, so the people in the class could see the faces instead of just the faculty members, where there's more collaboration, or where that class meets in person, a certain number of times per semester to build that community, right? Especially in community college and college, we are learning that sense of community and sense of belonging somewhere is one of the keys to retention, right? That's what keeps students here. So to me, the most important fix, and if I had the genius to design it, I would, I would be rich. But I think it's some way to help build that community amongst all the learners when they're hybrid.
Yeah, well, and we've implemented that style of hybrid communication with some of our conferences, and it is so expensive, and so complicated to be the administrator of that platform. Like it is prohibitive. And so it's, both from like a technical expertise, like you need to hire someone like us to implement that, to manage the hybrid platform, to manage the experience of the in-person and the virtual and bring them together. And that is prohibitive. And so it really is this investment, if we're going to keep doing it, that we're going to need to make so that a hybrid experience is equitable for everybody.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Emily? Did I freeze?
You did freeze. There you are.
Okay.
Maybe I froze.
I'm back again. Okay.
Yes.
I was like, did Emily freeze or did I freeze?
No way to know.
Well,
no
here's, challenge number one of the hybrid.
Yes.
And
well,
I think in light, just in light of not having that solution right now, I will say one of the I think it's the very last article that'll be sent out by Delaney after this has some fun ways to engage folks that are working remotely, like things like, like a bingo sheet of like, do you remember, does so-and-so have a beard, or there's just different ways to make it a little bit more fun. And I think we're having to live with how can we make it a little more bearable, because we don't have the perfect solution yet.
It sounds so dumb, but I think we did 2 virtual holiday parties, and I did bingo cards, and it was really fun. And so it was like, just the things that we knew were gonna happen, like one of Llewellyn's kids shows up, and Nico's dog barks, and Delaney's cat shows up, and it was actually like really stupidly fun. Yeah, well, this is wild, but we have done it. We have used up our 25 minutes. So I want to open it up to the group. Any questions that we have for Tina or for one another, or again, shared experiences, success stories, challenges that we can maybe workshop together. And I see a couple things in the chat. So Jeanette said, in my family, both of my kids were in college during the pandemic and courses went online. Interestingly, they both selected one online advanced degree program. So that's interesting. So like it must have just worked for them, that virtual environment.
I think that they got used to it during the pandemic. They got used to learning online, and then it just made sense for them because they can continue to work and do other things. They both work part-time and go to school full-time. And so it just made sense. And so I think this generation that's in school now, that they're just becoming more accustomed to working virtually. In fact, one of them works virtually now for her job. So I think my prediction is we're going to see more of this in the future.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and it really, and what I think is a game changer for the students is the online asynchronous classes, which is you're not all in the class at the same time. You're just sort of, given work, you're on a platform, you do it at your own pace. I have a nephew who, works 2 jobs, has a young, a 2-year-old, and is trying to figure out how can I go to college and still support my family and spend time with my family while my family's awake. And so I was like, you need a program that is completely online asynchronous, because you might not get the social benefits of going to college, but you're in it so that you can get a better job and support your family the way you want to. And that would allow you could do your work at midnight if you wanted to. So I think that sort of hyper flexibility in terms of academics, it'll be interesting to see if that ever makes its way into the work world. I think to some degree, but there's always going to be times where people have to meet. So there'll have to be some sort of regular office hours for a lot of positions, but not all.
Yeah, I think we're doing a pretty good job of trying to do sort of an asynchronous work style. Jeanette was just on, and she's a night owl, and so we will get emails from Jeanette at times when most of us are asleep. and I think Llewellyn is probably our biggest success story of that asynchronous, because she was raising little kids. And so, yeah, her entire slate of work was done outside of traditional hours. And I think some things have to be done during the daytime. Okay, right? That's just, if you have a meeting at 9, you got to be on at 9. But I think we're learning, at least what I've seen, is there's a real benefit to having that asynchronous, because you're giving people the power to work when they are most powerful. So like, it's actually in my best interest to let Jeanette work late at night, even though I think she's crazy. Yeah, and so Llewellyn said, in terms of students building confidence and self-esteem, now that the world has reopened, I imagine that Oxnard College has been trying to make up for lost time. What has been working and what hasn't?
Yeah, so what has worked for the students who show up? So I would say one of the hardest things is getting students to show up for things, especially because we still have a lot of, classes that are online. But we've held a lot more information sessions. We've talked a lot about mental health in all of our different student groups, right? So our Associated Student Government has worked to do a campus-wide survey that all of the district has done, but really get the information out to our students. The challenge is really getting people there. And I know I have struggled with this, right? I think when everything shut down, I was like, oh, I was really busy, right? And first I was really bored. And then I was like, this is nice, like to rest when you're tired. And so like, when we reopened, I had promised myself, like, I'm not going to go back to being as busy as I was, right? I can't attend everything because that depletes me. So getting students to show up for things has been a challenge, but when they do show up, so we offer food, that always works for students, the best motivator. And really, I think one of the great things that has come out of the pandemic is we have made at least baby steps in destigmatizing the need for, if not mental health counseling, at least awareness of what you can do yourself. Those things like get some exercise, get some sunshine, eat healthy when you can, build connection, have people you care about, reach out to them, even if you can't see them in person. That it has kind of put that in people's forefront as a much more normal thing. And so I think that in the long run, we're going to have a lot more students willing to take advantage of the services that are available.
I love it. We have one more question in the chat. I have heard comments from older generations asking, is online education as good as in-person education?
I mean, well, the content, sure. You know, but I also think different learning styles work for different people. So I, for one, have a hard time concentrating when I'm doing an online class. I tend to multitask, but I'm a multitasker, a problematic multitasker anyway. So I think it can really work for students in terms of the content. What you are missing, and it's really weird because right before the pandemic, the entire shift in education was group activity, right? Group discussion, group, you know, getting people to think creatively as a group, more prepare them for like the workforce where you have to work as a member of a team and work together on things. That can be done remotely. It's hard to do that in an asynchronous class, but so I would say for sure the content and the education is the same, whether you're going to retain the information and get what you would get out of a live class. I think depends on the individual.
I agree with you. And there are like not only the different learning styles. So I'm a kinesthetic learner. And so what that could mean is like I would crochet because like when I'm moving my body, I'm learning things, but that's not always allowed in places, right? Like why you're distracting, you know, you need to focus on the work. And it's like, well, actually, this is helpful to me. So there's that aspect where in person or virtual would have benefits to different learning styles. But to like, if I'm out in public and I'm anxious, I'm not learning anything. And so it was so interesting to watch the way different just the way different people were allowed to show up in bigger ways because it was a virtual environment, because perhaps they have physical limitations, or perhaps they have some emotional challenges that make it uncomfortable to be face to face with somebody. So yeah, it's just interesting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see over the next like 5 years how this all evolves. And
yeah, we have another comment. I took a class where they only allowed cameras on for the first day and the last day so we could concentrate. I thrived in it, and we went into separate rooms to work together.
Oh, like a breakout room.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, we're sort of on this new frontier of redefining what education looks like and redefining what interaction looks like. So
yeah, and the camera issue, right? It's, I know faculty have, you know, mentioned that it's so hard to build rapport with their students when they don't have their camera on, but also, I mean, there's, you know, some folks are in crowded housing. They don't necessarily want everyone to see the space that they're living and working in. You get a much more intimate view of people's lives when, you know, they're in their home with their camera on. So yeah, it is very, and again, there's no one right answer, right? Like you don't want to force students to have their camera on when that can cause, especially now with, you know, bullying that goes on and that kind of thing that, and my husband is a computer tech for the school district, and they've seen all kinds of stuff in the background on Zoom teaching sessions. So yeah, you want to, I think you just have to find other ways to build that rapport. And so maybe that's the faculty, the student going to the office hours with the faculty, you know, either in person or online with their camera on.
Mhm.
So that they still can see each other's face, get to know each other, feel a little bit like they know each other better without having the camera on with, you know, 100 students in the room.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Last words, or have we done it? We've solved it?
I wish. I'm going to be thinking about that software, and then I need to find someone to create it. But yes, when we solve that problem, we will be millionaires, and I will start a scholarship fund for every student here at Oxnard College.
Yes. Yes. Love it. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time and energy and talent. We're going to be sending out all of the articles and documents that we referenced, and I just really appreciate you so much.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me, and hang in there, everyone. I think we've all learned a lot through the pandemic, lots of good, some bad. And yeah, I think we are building forward
Yes.
a new
Yes.
reality that's gonna be interesting and hopefully amazing.
Yes. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.